Why Houston MedTech?
So we talked about, well, we are in Malta, we're still talking about Malta, and we're going to hopefully build a bridge with Homer's help here between Houston and Malta, as well as Israel and Malta. We're going to keep on building bridges from Malta with also the help of Dylan Attard here. This is a panel that I'm very excited about. I'll get to the punchline. It's my home, and it's now my new home, and I'll tell you why. We had Dylan Attard come over from Malta in mid-August to show him what is actually happening in Houston. And I have to tell you my transparent story. I fell in love with Houston 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago at this point, and it was about a little over a year at this point that I decided that we were going to move. And if anyone's moved before, you realize the pain of moving. And not only did I move my family, I moved my firm. And we didn't have to. So that's the true punchline. That's also the power of what I saw in Houston and what I totally believe Houston represents and will represent for the MedTech industry. So we have a very distinguished panel here that covers a gamut of what represents the ecosystem going on in Houston. Not to mention that I only found out a few weeks ago that we actually even have a wine region right north of Houston. Most people think it's in Fredericksburg, Texas. We actually have one right there. So if I wasn't going to move to Houston for what it was, I would definitely move there for the wine industry. It's pretty awesome. So come and check it out. But it has a lot of attributes. And when I looked at my wife and I said, listen, why are we really going to move? And are you on board with moving? And she goes, just don't move me anywhere that snows. And I said, okay, fine. Minneapolis, Boston's out. We do a lot of work over in Europe. So for that matter, California and the West Coast is out. But it has to be driven by MedTech. And we started really doing assessment, but it wasn't that hard to find Houston. And what we're going to talk about is a major draw of having the patient populations by the largest hospital and medical center in the world, which you may or may not know. And we're going to talk about getting the word of Houston out there. A lot of people think sometimes it's a flyover state, the coast this, the coast that. But I will tell you, a line that I have heard over and over again is that if you arrived in Houston 10 years ago, you might be too early. And if you arrive in Houston 10 years from now, you might be too late. The time is now, and the energy and the inertia that this town and this city has, which is the fourth largest city in the United States, is absolutely incredible. So a lot of energy is going to be going in to building up this ecosystem and actually leveraging already what is there and getting the word out. So without further ado, I'd like to distinguish this panel by having them introduce themselves, as well as my wonderful co-host over there, John Souza from Lifeblood, starting with Homer. Homer, please tell us a little bit about yourself and why you stayed in Houston.
Thank you, Giovanni. So I am the director of the Center for Rapid Device Translation. My job is actually really easy. I get to see novel technology that's going to impact patient care and facilitate that technology's R&D to reach those patients. So everything from startups to industry partners. And the thing that kept me in Houston, and I've had an opportunity or opportunities to work all over the world at this point in the MedTech space, is there is a magic there that really doesn't exist in any other place in the world at this point. And it's not just the patient populations, it's not just the institutions, it's the innovation culture that exists there in the MedTech space that I don't think is matched in any other space. There are places where you can get MedTech or just tech in general across and into a space, but I don't think the passion that you see in the people that are engaged in that process is showcased as well as we see in Houston.
Thank you. And Bob, you've been all over the place, but you've now been back in Houston for a while. Tell us who you are, what you do, and why are you staying in Houston?
Sure. I'm Bob Shaw, and I chair the Life Sciences Committee for the Houston Angel Network. I've been involved with angel investing about 8 years. Prior to that, I was in healthcare leadership and C-suite in several different places, as Giovanni said. And we left Houston in 2001 and came back in 2014. And it's kind of interesting, the 10 years too early, 10 years too late. So I guess I got there in time, but it's a very different place than when I left in 2001. And the culture and the environment in Houston is so unique. Having moved around quite a bit, I really realize how different Houston is. In what I call, it's a can-do town. Anything they set their mind to, they seem to be able to accomplish. And so, and a lot of that's through innovation and energy, and we have major industries in the energy business, the port system, NASA, and tech, more tech now. And of course, the whole life sciences, biotech, MedTech space in the medical center. The medical center is huge. Just to give you an idea of the size and scope, 160,000 people go in and out of the medical center every day. And so it's like a big town, so to speak, that you're operating within. 750,000 ER visits a year. I think 13 million patient visits, if I remember the number right. So we've always kind of based out of Houston, so that's why we came back, and that's why it's I call it my final resting place, so to speak. That's where we plan to live the rest of our lives, and very exciting times there right now with these partners here on the podium. We've just, there's so much going on, and very collaborative too, by the way. We have a tendency we have a tendency to work together. I think that's a key element in Houston as well.
Thank you. And sometimes you look at me funny when I call you Houston's golden boy, but Albert Wong started, developed, and exited your company in Houston, and we're going to get that story. And actually, we have Northgate here, who has already given the other side of that story, which is pretty cool. But tell us a little bit about who you are, what you've done, and why Houston.
Thanks, Giovanni. I guess just to build on that, my name's Albert Huang, was the previous, or I guess will always be the founder and CEO of a company called Allotrope Medical. Like Giovanni mentioned, I came up with the idea while working late one night in the operating room at Houston Methodist, and then decided to build a company in 2016 and focus on that full time, keeping it, and it was never a question whether I should put it somewhere else or in Houston. It was always Houston based. The next company will be Houston-based as well, and had the opportunity to spend time even in the Bay Area amongst all the entrepreneurs there, Y Combinator, things like that. But everything kept pulling me back to Houston because the ecosystem is there. Our first investors were Houston Angel Network. Over the course of about a decade, watched and grew the company along with everything else developing in the ecosystem there, and it's been really exciting to see all that. And the company wouldn't have gotten to where it was, wouldn't have gotten to the point of being acquired by Northgate Technologies about a year and a half ago. I truly believe that we weren't in Houston at all.
Thank you. And Megan, tell us who you are, what you're developing, and your Houston story.
Thanks, Giovanni. So I'm Megan Pitcher. I'm CEO and co-founder at Baritone Health. We're working on a wearable technology that does sleep apnea diagnosis, showing the underlying cause of sleep apnea. My Houston story, I've been in Houston my entire professional career. My first job out of college was at a biotech company at Lexicon Pharmaceuticals. Did graduate school there, worked in intellectual property there. I think what keeps me there is this incredible talent pool. So we talk about all the patients that come into the med center, but the people that kind of come to Houston, have their first job there, build their career there, develop all these different skill sets, hop around between hospitals and medical systems and stuff. It's incredible. And so then you have the situation where you can have a conversation with someone and you could spark this really great idea, spark innovation from there, figure out how to solve a problem that you're having with building the device like we're doing. So that's what really excites me about Houston, is kind of being able to live in this network and grow in this network and meet people that are incredibly talented that can help us grow the company and get it to hopefully where Albert is in a few years and get it exited.
Thank you. The Swarna, tell us about who you are, what you've been developing, and what's been keeping you in Houston all these years.
Giovanni and Dylan, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. And I feel notorious already with the D in front of my name. So my name is Dr. Swarna Balasubramaniam, and I am a board-certified colon and rectal surgeon, and for the past 5 years have been the founder and CEO of Nolius Technologies, where we're developing a single-use medical device to treat an unmet clinical need called postoperative ileus, the intestinal paralysis that keeps people in the hospital for a long time after surgery. And you know, my Houston story starts back in 2007. So I grew up in Boston, went to school, college there, and then medical school and training in Minnesota, lived in Los Angeles, New York City, and came to Houston for a job. And it is the best place I've ever lived. And people find that very interesting because I've lived in a lot of great places, including the Upper West Side and Beverly Hills, and this is fantastic. And I tell you why. And it's because the lower cost of living allows people to take risk in Houston. So, you know, when you are strapped to the point where your income just covers your rent and cost of living, you can't take a risk. And being in Houston has allowed me to save enough money that I'm able to take the risk to build my startup. And that is a huge, huge thing. I mean, there are many things that Houston, has going in its favor, but I would say that might be the number one unsung thing about Houston. So I'll stop there and we'll talk more.
Thank you. Justin, you're not originally from Houston, and you've been there now for a while. So tell us who you are, what you do for the ecosystem, what you do for MD Anderson, and what kept you in Houston.
Yeah, thanks, Giovanni. My name is Justin Bird. I'm an orthopedic oncologist and a spine surgeon at MD Anderson Cancer Center. I started out on the East Coast. I'm from New Jersey originally. Went to medical school in New York City at Mount Sinai. I did my orthopedic residency there. I thought I was going to go into sports medicine, but I gravitated towards oncology. I then had an opportunity to spend a year in Liberia, West Africa. And that experience really got me thinking about medical technology because I was thrust in this environment where I had little to no resources. And I realized I was taking for granted a lot of the resources that I had in New York City as a resident. And when you're in a place where you don't have resources, you start to try and figure things out. And I started to tinker and make devices that I was using in New York that I didn't have in Liberia. And so really started to think about that process of invention and innovation and how we get devices into our hands. And then I left Liberia, came to Houston for further training, so I did fellowship in oncology at MD Anderson and then another fellowship in spine surgery. And I thought I was going back to New York City for a job. My wife is a urogynecologist, and so she was also trained at Mount Sinai, so we had plans to go back to New York City. But we got to Houston, and particularly MD Anderson, it was a very special place. It was unlike any other place that I had worked at. It's a very mission-driven organization. We have many of our former patients or volunteers that you see every day, so they've lived through these challenging times, and now they actually just volunteer their time to take care of other people. So it's that kind of place which I gravitated towards. I think Megan mentioned, the talent pool. So I was also really excited about the people that were working there, and they had come from all over the world to come to work in the Med Center. And then I started to kind of do my research on how the Med Center actually came about, and it's a very interesting history. It was a surgeon by the name of Ernst Bertner who actually had the vision to create this medical center for the world, and I think that's resonates with me. The idea of coming to Houston to do something very important for the world, I think is part of the Houston culture and the ethos. And so I really enjoyed that environment where you can have these big ideas and you can launch something that's going to have an impact on the world. So that's why I'm still in Houston. That and my kids don't want to leave.
Very nice. So I'm going to toss it over to John and what his thoughts are on Houston, and then he'll have the first question for the panel. But while he's asking and answering, I just want you all to think about one unique thing about Houston that you think the world or outsiders don't necessarily know that is pretty cool about Houston. And when the mic comes to you, just throw a cool Houston fact out there if you don't mind. So go ahead, John.
Sure. Thanks, Giovanni. So really great to have everyone here on the panel. Obviously, after hearing all that, it's hard not to fall in love with Houston, but I definitely fell in love with it the first time that I went, and kind of organized a bunch of meetings to learn more about Houston and meet the people there. And really the culture of collaboration is second to none, and that's paired with all of the facts that you can kind of see on paper with 3 major universities, major medical centers, the largest medical center in the world, patients traveling from literally all over the world with every type of pathology that you can think of or has been discovered at all various stages of progression. The opportunities to help people and to innovate are really unparalleled. So coming from a clinical background, that's really something that I hadn't seen anywhere else. So the question I want to ask you guys, and maybe Homer can kick us off, in the next 12, 24 months, what's the most exciting thing that you see on the horizon for Houston?
So just fun fact, I think something novel about Houston that everyone should know about is Rice University was where President Kennedy said we must make it to the moon. The moonshot began maybe a half a mile from the Texas Medical Center. And it's all intertwined. We're actually back in collaborations with Rice to talk about things like human performance, to talk about things like neural system restoration or brain-computer interface. There was a discussion earlier, you've got the Neuralinks of the world. Well, we have an academic institute. There are some brilliant minds that exist across the street at Rice University and at other academic institutes within the 2.5 square miles that comprise the Texas Medical Center. So just as a general notion, Houston Methodist itself is a 105-year-old hospital system, but we are not a degree-granting institution. So we have to affiliate. And that affiliation allows us access to some very brilliant, creative people that can come up with novel ideas in collaboration with our clinicians. Everything that we do there is translationally driven, which means that at the end of the day, we have to have something that's going to reach the patient. We're not just inventing things or discovering things for the sake of discovery or basic science. There's a mission there. So the things that I'm excited about actually revolve around the space that I mentioned before, the neurosystem restoration. Our oncology center, Neal Cancer Center, is doing some tremendous things to not compete with the gorilla in the room that is MD Anderson right across the street from us. That's the #1 hospital for oncology in the United States. We understand that. But to be able to bring novel care and new approaches to patients that need it just like anyone else. And so some of the things that we're seeing through simulation, through training, and I saw Dr. Bird on Monday conducting a training or education procedure at our simulation center. That speaks to the collaborative nature of the world that we live in. The thing that I want more of is more collaboration. You need to have these spaces where innovation collides, great ideas come out, and then there is a playground or a rule or a framework in place to allow that to turn into real things.
Does anyone want to riff on that, or want me to throw out my next question?
I think, all right, there we go. Thanks, folks. For me, it's not a specific 12 or 20 month like singular event or number of events. I think it's exactly what Homer is talking about, right? For the longest time, especially the medical center, when I wanted to describe it to people, I said all these hospitals are great unto themselves, but I consider them frenemies. They're always competing against each other. It's like Baylor versus Methodist versus MD Anderson, things like that. But the spirit of finally everything opening up, coming together, I think it's, maybe hesitate to say like our generation of clinicians, new blood coming in, lifeblood coming in, and things like that are what's really building this collaborative atmosphere. More and more startups that were born and bred in the ecosystem are getting more and more mature, more money's coming in from outside. Initiatives from Han are funding a lot of these new companies as well. So it's really, you're starting to see this building and this momentum actually happening that I think over the next 12, 24 months are truly going to get exciting. And then the other thing about Houston is it's an amazing place for food. Actually, so much so that next week is when the first Michelin stars for Houston as well as Texas will be announced.
November 11th.
That's right. So,
if you like Michelin star food, November 11th, come to Houston.
Or barbecue.
I was just going to kind of add to what Homer said about JFK and his speech. So I actually, unfortunately, I live right across from Rice University, right across from the stadium. And so I think about it all the time that JFK back in 1962 gave that speech and talked about, going to space and going to the moon and really trying to get the energy of the nation to go and do something very difficult. I'm also fortunate to work with an astronaut. So in our department, Bobby Satcher is a former astronaut. And we have a number of astronauts floating around Houston, excuse the pun. But it's really exciting to just meet these folks who have been very courageous and gone and done some pretty amazing things and brought it back down to earth and still interact with us humans. But it's a great environment. I think the idea of what's happening now that's exciting is the collaboration and really the idea that if we work together, we can actually do much more than if we work separately. And we have been frenemies for a long time, but I think from an innovation standpoint, I think the institutions oftentimes look at each other as kind of the frenemy. But in the lab and clinical care, I think we all know how to work together and we really enjoy that. So we're talking to our institutions to see it our way and allow us to actually be more collaborative.
And I want to throw something over to you for MD Anderson and Houston for that matter, or Houston Methodist, when you think about companies that need access to patients, when you think about innovation that's going to occur or is occurring within MD Anderson and some of the other major hospital systems, what is some of that past, present, and future? What are you guys going through right now?
I think, well, it is an exciting time. I think for MD Anderson, for many, many years, it was all about drug development and diagnostics. And medical device really didn't exist here or there. So we had to uncover kind of the history and realize that we have some very impactful inventors. Dr. Gianturku is one who was a radiologist who came out of retirement because one of his buddies was at MD Anderson and said, come and work at MD Anderson to teach the residents. And while he was at Anderson, out of retirement, he started to see these problems and address them and start to invent new technologies. So IVC filters and coils and things like that are still being used today. So we're unearthing that so that we can kind of get that message out there that med device is a real thing and we should be involved in that too. As a surgeon, that's what I use. These devices are really critical. And again, going back to my experience in Liberia, not having the devices, what I see happens to people when they're struggling with these problems. So I think focus on medical devices, smart devices. I think people were talking about the device is not just a simple device. There's a lot of data that you can generate from these devices. If you are intentional about it, you can capture that information and really leverage it.
Swarna, you have something to say, Bob?
Just one item. The thing I'd like for you to know about Houston is it's a generous community. And by that I mean everything that's been talked about here really was created by people of great wealth. The oil and gas business really created a wealth in Houston that is unbelievable. And then as it diversified, it even diversified into greater wealth. And those have been very generous people that have impacted the arts and definitely the medical center and the whole healthcare environment within Houston. None of this would be possible without those kinds of contributions that have been made by the community. And it really allows us to do some things that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise off of patient revenue. I think you and Homer would agree with that as well. It's a really, it all started, if you go back, way back, with MD, Monroe D. Anderson, who gave 143 acres to form the Texas Medical Center. And from that, and 3 institutions went to the medical center. And it was really in a swamp. It was a mosquito-infested swamp that they developed into what today is known as the Texas Medical Center. And it's kind of an incredible journey over those years. But the diversity and the generosity of the town really makes the difference in Houston, Texas.
Thank you. And Swarna, I want to throw it over to you. So you've lived in a bunch of different places. You've been building Nolius. talk about, well, first, your one unique thing about Houston that you want to share, and then also, where could we go in Houston?
Great questions, but the most surprising thing I found about Houston is it has the biggest rodeo. And so that's a little known fact for people outside of Houston. And it was a surprise to me too, because I'd been to the rodeo in Cody, Wyoming, and I was like, this is awesome. And then I came to Houston, and I was like, wow, that was just a little bitty rodeo compared to what happens in Houston. So.
And that takes place in March, right?
Yeah, come on down in March if you want to check out the rodeo. So you'll get a real Western experience. But back to the question about where Houston could go. So Bob is absolutely correct. There is a ton of wealth in Houston. And without that kind of wealth, it would not have developed into a city that is not only the fourth largest, but nipping on the heels of Chicago to be number 3, which it will be soon. Chicago is not growing, and Houston is growing by leaps and bounds. But, you know, I've raised, of the money I've raised, 2/3 of it, about $2 million, has been from Houston. But it's really been people I know and people I've had to educate to invest in, medical devices. So there's a history, of people in Houston with a lot of money investing in hard assets, real estate, oil and gas and such. But there isn't a history of people being, having the diligence and education to invest in, IP-based assets, so to speak. And so I think there's a real opportunity to develop that and basically turn Houston into a town where that wealth could be deployed to support innovation in a way that really hasn't been yet. And so I think, there is all the right ingredients, but the cake needs to be mixed and baked.
So, Houston is full of incredible history, from announcing the moonshot to Michael DeBakey, one of the foremost cardiac surgeons back in the day, who invented extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, or ECMO, which has saved countless lives. It's really a town of risk takers, and that's evident in the amount of early stage innovation that's going on. The thing is, people in Houston are generally not very flashy and are very humble with respect to their achievements and what they've attained from being such risk takers, which is why the world kind of almost doesn't really know about everything that Houston is about. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this panel and kind of highlight the city as kind of the up-and-coming, one of the up-and-coming epicenters of MedTech. So, Megan, I'd love if you can, chat about your experience starting a company, that kind of early stage risk taking, and how the, culture was supportive of your endeavor.
Sure. So I launched our company out of a program called Texas Medical Center Biodesign. This is based off of a Stanford curriculum where you have these conversations and you talk to people and you understand where problems are in healthcare that you and your team can solve. So I kind of, coming out of that network and ecosystem, I kind of knew what some of the problems were and where to find answers and who to talk to. Also had support of talking. We were introduced to Dr. Bird, for example. We had a call with him. Albert was assigned to us as a mentor, so he was really helpful just getting the initial first steps of the company off the ground. So kind of having these interactions from different types of people in the ecosystem was really helpful. Because again, my background was pretty safe, administrative, intellectual property management job at Baylor College of Medicine. So I did IP stuff, and then I went home and got my paycheck, and it was good. It's completely different from, we have an idea, talking to investors, getting them to believe in the idea, while you're also working on the idea and making it tangible. So getting all of these skill sets from just how you communicate about what you're working on, especially coming from a scientific background. Basic things like, how do you manage your budget on a government grant? I hadn't done that directly before. I was able to find all these answers by talking with people in the medical center. Oh, I got to shout out Homer, too. We have this study going on at Houston Methodist, which is a large organization. So for a startup to come in and say, hey, we want to build this prototype and try it on some folks, need support to kind of get that eye through the institution. So yeah, I mean, just examples from people on this panel that have been really helpful. I think Houston's great. I wanted to hit on something Dr. Bird said about you have all these individuals that have these really great and innovative ideas and they want to do something. There's this piece of graffiti on one of the highway overpasses that says, "Be someone." I think that's such a Houston thing that I love, because people want to go into Houston, very humbly work on their thing and be the best at it and do something really great.
A couple follow-ups on that. We have a little different attitude or philosophy at the Houston Angel Network. We do talk to people that we probably are not going to invest in, or we haven't made a decision to invest in. And obviously, our number one mission is to bring great companies with great potential to our members to invest in. It helps the company, it helps our investors as well, our members. But we do a tremendous amount of mentoring of companies and their executive teams. And as a matter of fact, one of the major criteria in which we invest is how coachable and how interactive the management team is with us. And then I'd say the third area that we really spend a fair amount of time, and I've really focused on in MedTech, is the wealth is in Houston. I have no doubt the wealth is in Houston, and I know where some of it is, and I'm looking for it pretty hard right now. But we need to educate, Swana touched on this, we need to educate the people with wealth, family offices, about how to invest in MedTech and get us good or maybe better returns than even in hard assets like real estate. Real estate's been king in Houston. We have no zoning, which is kind of an interesting thing in the States. You can build anything you want to, wherever you want to. There are some permitting requirements, but a gas station might go up next to your house is the downside of that, but that happens less often than you might think. But it's really allowed us to grow very fast. And so real estate's been key, and we're going to transfer that thought process of those wealth managers and offices to know what MedTech and what the opportunities are in investing there.
Thank you. Albert, I want to throw it over to you. You have the career, and you built this company called Allotrope. There must have been points where you could have moved the company, and you could have went to San Francisco, you could have went to Boston. And one of my more recent talk tracks that I've been telling myself during the night is, if you're a co-founder or founder of a medical device company in Eastern Tennessee, in Maryland, wherever it may be, if you're going to build and exit a company, you have almost a 0% chance that you'll never make it to San Francisco or Boston. You almost have to go. While you should go to Houston, especially for the patient access, it's not necessarily that you're always going to make it to Houston on your journey. Our goal is we want to make sure that everyone knows the assets that Houston has, but you were able to actually leverage those by just being there. Why didn't you move your company when you could have?
That's a fair question, because actually for a period of time I did move to San Francisco when Allotrope was invested in by Y Combinator. At that time, this was pre-pandemic, like you actually physically had to go there and spend all of your time there. And it was always energizing, right? It's like every time JP Morgan, or even when I land at the SFO airport and drive through, you almost feel like there is this energy of innovation. Everybody's working on their company at every coffee shop there. There is something about that, but it is also refreshing and a little bit of a sigh of relief to come back to Houston every time that I started to relish and appreciate more, is that it's still young, right? There's still this sense of opportunity. And I think the downside to being in places like the Bay Area, as great as it is, and like money is there because it's so established that you naturally will bounce back and forth, is that out there, a lot of people end up like talking themselves up and ultimately sometimes making the wrong decision for their company because their benchmarks are the Googles and the Facebooks and these massive corporations, and it's always go big or zero, right? And then I think and I've had friends who went from 9-figure valuation companies to closing shop because that is what everybody was telling them to do over there. Whereas Houston, I feel like, there's a pragmatic aspect to it that seems to pervade, not only just the way you live there, but also how everybody else functions. It truly is, for healthcare things, patient first. The goal is to get something out there. The first discussion isn't, are you going to IPO or things along those lines? It's about creating something, your product, that best benefits folks. And that's always first and foremost, right? And so that always resonated with me, not only as a clinician, but just me as a person. And so when we made that decision to be like, do we do Bay Area? Like we always thought we were going to, but then Houston just always had everything we needed to, and you never lost that access because you can get on a plane at the international airport and you're there, and it's multiple flights a day. So easy access to everywhere. You still come back to this place where the ecosystem is growing, but kind of like going to your favorite bar, like everybody knows your name after a while when you're there, right? I mean, Justin and I, we were at J-Labs together with desks right next to each other. All of us see each other on a very regular basis, as massive as a medical center as it is, and everybody is a cheerleader for everybody else. And I think there's something there, whereas these more established places, nobody knows your name, right? You're anonymous because everybody's an entrepreneur, right, for better or worse.
No state income taxes, right in the center of the country, 3 hours to California, 3 hours to Boston, international flights to Europe, international flights to the Middle East, international flights to Asia, down to Australia. So amazing logistical support. And John, take us home after this one, but I want to throw one more over to Homer, because I want to look at this panel as an education so that these people know exactly what we have there, starting with what you've toured me around twice so far, and it is arguably one of the most impressive facilities that I've ever seen. A, I always forget, what does MIGHTY stand for? And B, describe what you have that you see every single day.
Yeah, sure. So MIGHTY is the Methodist Institute for Technology, Innovation, and Education at the Bookout. There's this thing called philanthropic funding, where for X amount of money investing in new technology and new approaches, we rename things. And the Bookout name is synonymous with Houston. They are very much entrenched in everything from the governance to street names after them. The beauty of the space of MIGHTY is it's probably the second or third largest simulation center by size in the United States. And when I say simulation, I can recreate a patient environment, I can recreate an OR environment. If I'm working as a firefighter, I can even recreate a scenario where I'm placing airways in down patients. So when you have a space where I can simulate just about any type of procedure, and more importantly, I have access to imaging modalities that are essential when I'm developing and testing technologies, it's really easy to do just about any type of testing that's going to get you to clinical trials. And then more importantly, right next to that building, actually connected to it, is our hospital. It's the main hub of an 8-hospital system that extends across the Houston area. We are not Southwest Texas Methodist. We are not South United States Methodist. We are Houston Methodist. Everything that we do is for our patients in our community. I think that, to me, really drives home the notion of, yes, we have technology, yes, we have facilities, but more importantly, we have a culture of patient care that's focused on the people that we interact with on a day-to-day basis.
And lastly on my side is, you and I had lunch not too long ago, and I even said, like, how can we help build up Houston even more than what it is right now, and be a San Francisco, be a Boston? And your answer or question back to me was, it just made me think, because I had to reframe my statement. You're like, well, we don't want to be a San Francisco. We don't want to be a Boston. What do we want to be?
Yeah, so Albert was speaking exactly about that, right? San Francisco, there's an established culture that happens like this. In Boston, it's a transactional approach. I think what we have here in Houston that makes us so special, and the thing that's going to continue making us special, is we're Texan by nature. There is an approach to just being courteous and extending yourself in spaces that you normally wouldn't, because you want to see things happen. But more importantly, we all know what the Texas Medical Center means to the city of Houston, not just for the patients, but for the economy and the industries that live in Houston. There's 3 major economies or industries, and we've spoken about that. It's healthcare, it's NASA or aeronautics, and it's energy. And all three of those, at some point or fashion, actually interact with one another, intersect, we collaborate. So without having this special place and having it in a way where we can keep continuing to collaborate, I don't think it is what it's going to be. And I think we have that. We have that in spades. It's not going to be a space where there's going to be a ton of funding that's going to happen for every startup. We're very selective, and as a mission-driven approach, you have to be selective of the technologies that you undertake. We're not just going to pick up any technology that comes knocking on our door. I've only worked with 52 startups in the 8 years that I've managed or directed the Center for Rapid Device Translation. I've met probably 2,500, 3,000 companies over that time, but the success rate, 65% of those companies reach a milestone, whether that's regulatory, financial, to keep driving that innovation forward. So to me, biotech and life sciences, the success rate is 10%. I'd like to think that every company I work with is part of that 10%. I'm pretty close with 65%.
The innovation and the transition that healthcare is going through is also happening in the energy business, as you know. I mean, I'm amazed that the big energy companies are starting to really invest in green energy now. And that innovation is just like a spin wheel to get more innovation going in Houston. And then, of course, NASA with the Mars mission in hand. The reason we're looking at, we've started a new part of life sciences now in aerospace medicine, because the NASA integration and work with they do with the Texas Medical Center really is going to offer some opportunities in everything from how we do surgery in rural Texas to major advances in technology and medical device. It's really, really exciting times with all three of those industries working together and the synergy of the innovation that's occurring between them.
Shameless plug. If you're in Houston, December the 9th, we've got something called Pumps and Pipes. It's going to be at Helix Park. Please attend. It's those three industries coming together like they have for the last 17 years and sharing best practices and collaborating for real-world problems.
So Homer kind of read my mind, but first of all, to summarize, there are countless philosophical and pragmatic reasons to live in Houston, specifically for MedTech. What I'd like to go down the line, I want everyone to invite the audience to visit Houston and give your top recommendation for what to do, fun thing to do in the city when they visit.
Well, let me think about that. So one, welcome to Houston. Definitely, you want to go to the rodeo, as been mentioned. You want to see the Space Center. Definitely, I think those are things that we really enjoy. And the last thing I'll say is you want to go to a Houston Texans game. Football is big in Texas and in Houston, and so the Texans are winning these days. So it's a great time to come and visit.
Great advice, Justin. But I'll tell you, the number one thing is to come to Houston in the winter, because the weather is fantastic. So the summer is 100 degrees, but in the winter, everyone's jealous of us because it's about 70 degrees and you can go outside in your shorts and just enjoy the weather all day. And especially if you come around the holidays, Houstonians do a fantastic job of lighting up the city and putting on quite a show at the hotels. There's a huge museum district in Houston that's all lit up. You can go down to Galveston and enjoy a big garden that's all lit up, and there's just a lot of fun activities in the winter, especially around the holidays. So I highly recommend it.
I was going to follow and talk more about the museums. There are really some fantastic museums in Houston. I think Houston doesn't get its due respect on that matter. I mean, there's a really great Museum of Fine Arts, contemporary arts, the Mental Collection. It's awesome. So that would be my recommendation. Come and have a day at the museums. For dinner, have some Tex-Mex, have some barbecue, and if you want to have something else, we have anything that you want to eat in Houston.
From food to, we'll switch to drink. I collect a lot of wine, or other folks call it a hoarding problem. So if you come to Houston, you can come meet me at the wine storage place and we can rip corks on a ton of bottles like some of the folks over here have.
that will be something you'll never forget, by the way. That's quite a trip. Let's see, I would say that you should visit the Texas Medical Center for one. And two, I would say also NASA's worthwhile. The Space Center, I think, is really a eye-opener. And then the Museum of Fine Arts is a wonderful, wonderful experience as well. There are a number of museums. There's a museum district, so all the museums in that district are worthwhile. And I'll stop there.
So I agree. Visit us as soon as possible. If you actually visit, let me know. I'll probably give you a tour of our facilities so you can understand. And that actually helps me because then you go to your home and your city, state, country, and you promote my efforts so I don't have to do any more marketing. So thank you for that. But I would also recommend that you go down to NASA Space Center. There's only one other place in the U.S. that's comparable to that, and you want to experience it. The food is phenomenal. Get there as soon as possible.
And I'll close off real quickly that it's a new home for me, but I've been exploring as much as I possibly can, and they've covered the city. But about 45 to an hour north, there's something called the Blue Bonnet Wine Trail, and that takes you from Lake Livingston, Lake Conroe, all the way almost over to Austin, and in between there's a huge wine region that is actually a lot of fun to visit. So Houston has a tremendous amount to offer, and what I would say is, Houston, we don't have a problem, we have opportunity. Thank you guys so much.